The enemy fleet arrived in perfect formation, an armada of sleek, shimmering warships that blotted out the stars. The Vrek Dominion had never lost a war in over 1,000 years. Their empire spanned hundreds of worlds, their technology was unmatched, and their military doctrine was ruthless efficiency. And now, they had come for Earth. Grand Admiral Zilvoth stood at the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, staring at the pitifully small human defenses on his holoscreen. Earth's orbital fleet was laughable, dozens of outdated cruisers and a single battle carrier, HSS Titan, floating at the heart of their formation like a relic from a forgotten war. "Send the demand for surrender," Zilvoth ordered, his voice calm. "We shall grant them the mercy of servitude." A bridge officer, his crimson-scaled skin gleaming under the lights, pressed a few controls. A signal was sent, a broadcast of Vrek superiority. Moments later, the human response came through. The transmission flickered onto the view screen, revealing a human officer, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. Captain Elias Vance of the Titan. "If you think we're going to surrender," Vance said coolly, "you don't know humans very well." Zilvoth chuckled. "Your defiance is admirable, but it is also foolish. Your defenses are obsolete, your technology is primitive, and your forces are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Do you truly believe you stand a chance?" Vance smiled. It wasn't an arrogant smile. It wasn't the desperate grin of a man facing his end. It was something else, something that made the back of Zilvoth's mind itch with unease. "Oh, Admiral," Vance said, his voice steady, "you have no idea what you're about to face." With that, the transmission cut. Zilvoth sighed, shaking his head. Another species that thought courage could replace firepower. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "Crush them." Then, as if on cue, the Titan moved. Not forward, not in retreat. It moved up. With a speed no capital ship should have possessed, it shot into high orbit, past the Dominion fleet's firing range, and then it disappeared. Zilvoth frowned. Where did they? Then the alarms blared. One of his rear-line cruisers exploded in a blinding flash of energy. Then another. Then two more. Weapons fire, but from where? The fleet scrambled for answers, scanning every possible vector, but the sensors found nothing, only the burning wreckage of their ships. Then, something massive decloaked in the midst of their formation, the Titan. Except it wasn't just a battle carrier. It was something else, something new, something humanity had never shown before. And as its weapons charged, humanity taught the Vrak the first lesson of war. Never assume you know your enemy. Panic rippled through the Vrike fleet. This wasn't possible. No human ship had ever demonstrated cloaking technology, certainly not one of that size. Zilvoth's mandibles clicked together in frustration as his officers scrambled for answers. The Titan loomed in the heart of his fleet, its dark hull bristling with weaponry. How did they do that? One of his tacticians gasped. That shouldn't be possible. Enough, Zilvoth snarled. Focus fire on that ship. Now, across the Vrak fleet, weapon systems locked onto the Titan. Plasma lances, disruptor cannons, and torpedo arrays charged. But before they could fire, the Titan moved. It didn't just drift or rotate like a conventional warship. It pivoted in ways no capital-class vessel should have been able to, as if inertia meant nothing. Then it struck. The Titan's forward batteries unleashed a torrent of crimson energy, scything through Vrake cruisers like they were made of paper. A dozen ships vanished in balls of fire, their shields useless against the sheer force of the human weapons. Zilvoth's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. This wasn't brute force. This was precision. "They're targeting structural weak points," an officer shouted. "How do they know?" It clicked in Zilvoth's mind. They had been watched, studied. For decades, The Dominion had believed the humans to be nothing more than another expansion target, primitive creatures who had barely reached the stars. But somehow, they had been preparing. And now they were using that knowledge to carve through his fleet. "Adaptive warfare," Zilvoth murmured. The Titan flickered again, bending light around its hull as it disappeared. Cloaking and firing at the same time? Impossible. Yet humans had done it. A split second later, another explosion ripped through the Vrek formation as the Titan reappeared on the starboard flank. "They're playing with us," one of his admirals whispered. Zilvoth refused to believe it. The humans had one warship. One. The Dominion still had numbers. "All ships, scatter formation," he roared. "Surround them." His orders were met with immediate compliance, but even as the Dominion ships spread out, the Titan remained a ghost. One moment it was there, tearing apart battleships with weapons that should not exist. The next, it was gone, striking from another angle, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down. And then, as the chaos reached its peak, the human ship finally spoke. A message came through, broadcasting on all Dominion channels. Captain Vance's voice was calm. Cold. "You thought your weapons could stop us," he said. "You thought you knew what we were capable of." The transmission cut, and before Zilvoth could react, the Titan fired something new. Not lasers, not torpedoes, something worse. A pulse wave erupted from the ship, rippling outward in an expanding sphere of energy. When it struck the Dominion fleet, entire warships shut down. Engines died, shields collapsed, weapons refused to fire. They were blind, helpless, and the humans were not. The Titan reappeared at the heart of the crippled fleet. And then, the massacre began. Zilvoth watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. The Titan moved like no warship should, weaving through the crippled Dominion vessels like a predator among prey. Weapons fire erupted in all directions, one-sided, merciless. Ships that had ruled the stars for centuries were obliterated in seconds. The human warship didn't waste shots. Every blast of its crimson energy beams struck with surgical precision, carving through hulls, igniting fuel reserves, detonating reactor cores. Vrek officers shouted in terror. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was a cacophony of panic. "Our weapons won't charge. Shields are unresponsive. The human ship it's everywhere." Zilvoth clenched his fists. "Number. This wasn't how it was supposed to go." "Reroute emergency power," he barked. "Get those weapons online. If we cannot fight, we will ram them." His engineers scrambled, their clawed hands slamming into control panels. But the Titan was already there. On the holoscreen, the human ship loomed impossibly close. Its hull was nearly black, absorbing the light of the burning wreckage around it. Its design was alien, wrong to Vrek eyes. Their intelligence reports had shown nothing like this. This wasn't just a battle carrier. This was a superweapon. A flicker of static broke through the chaos. And then, Vance's voice. "You always thought we were weak," he said. Zilvoth turned sharply toward the view screen, his mandibles clicking in anger. "We are weak," he snarled. "You are one ship, human. One ship against an empire." Vance chuckled. "Empire? I see an empire that never faced real war. An empire that thought it could expand without consequence. Tell me, Admiral, what happens when you finally fight something stronger than you?" Zilvoth's blood ran cold. A second later, the Titan fired again. But this time it wasn't an attack. A high-frequency burst of energy rippled outward, sending shockwaves through space. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. Zilvoth's eyes widened. They weren't alone. All across the system, new contacts began appearing. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Ships uncloaked from the darkness. Human ships. Not just one Titan. Dozens. A fleet. This had never been a battle. It had been an execution. The realization hit Zilvoth like a hammer. The humans had never intended to fight fair. They had let the Dominion believe they were weak. Let them march their fleet into a trap. Let them believe their technological superiority would be enough. And now, the humans had come to finish the war before it could even begin. Zilvoth took a slow breath, his claws digging into the command console. He had to do something, anything. But as he stared at the swarm of human warships closing in, a terrible truth settled over him. There was nothing left to do. No surrender, no escape, only annihilation. The last thing he saw before the Titan fired again, before his flagship was engulfed in flames, was Vance's cold, human smile. The Vrike fleet was gone. Not routed, not defeated, erased. Their warships, once symbols of galactic dominance, were now debris fields drifting in the void. Fires burned in the wreckage, casting eerie shadows over the battlefield. The bodies of Vrake officers and soldiers floated weightlessly, their once mighty empire reduced to lifeless husks. Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge of the Titan, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The battle had been over in minutes. It hadn't been a fight. It had been a slaughter. "Status report," he said. "All enemy ships neutralized," Lieutenant Carter responded. "Minimal resistance. They never saw it coming." Vance exhaled slowly. Of course they hadn't. The Dominion had ruled the stars unchallenged for centuries, too arrogant to believe that their reign could ever end, too blind to realize that humanity had been watching, studying, preparing. "Admiral on deck," a voice called, and Vance turned as Fleet Admiral Helena Graves stepped onto the bridge. The woman was in her 60s, her hair silver, her uniform pristine. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, only cold calculation. "It's done," she said. Vance nodded. "What are your orders, Admiral?" She walked to the viewport, staring at the ruins of the once mighty Dominion fleet. Then, in a voice devoid of hesitation, she said, "Burn their homeworlds." Silence settled over the bridge. Vance didn't flinch. Understood. He had expected this. The Vrake Dominion had never granted mercy to its enemies. They had conquered, enslaved, exterminated. Now humanity was simply returning the favor. This wasn't just about war. This was about erasing a threat. "Deploy the fleet," Graves ordered. "I want every Vrake colony purged, every shipyard dismantled, every stronghold turned to dust. We end them completely, or we risk them coming back." Vance didn't argue. This was how humanity survived. It wasn't about fighting fair. It was about ensuring that the enemy never had a chance to rise again. "Set course for the Vrake homeworld," he said. "Let's finish what they started." The fleet moved. Thousands of human warships breaking formation, engines burning bright as they accelerated toward their next target. The war wasn't over, but soon there would be no one left to fight back. And the galaxy would remember this day. They would remember the mistake the Vrake had made. They had thought their weapons could stop humanity, but the Titan had proven them fatally wrong. The human fleet surged forward, engines burning bright against the void as they set course for the Vrake homeworld. Thousands of ships moved in perfect coordination, dreadnoughts, destroyers, and carriers, each one a symbol of humanity's readiness for war. On the bridge of the Titan, Captain Elias Vance stared at the holographic display of their next target. Vrakenar, the Dominion's throne world. It was a massive planet, covered in sprawling cities and fortified bastions, home to billions of Vrake citizens. "ETA?" Vance asked. 5 hours, Lieutenant Carter replied. "Enemy defenses are active, but it won't matter." Vance nodded. The Vrake homeworld was well defended, with orbital cannons, planetary shields, and massive garrisons. But none of that would stop what was coming. The Titan and its fleet weren't just attacking. They were here to erase the Dominion from existence. Fleet Admiral Helena Graves stood beside him, her gaze locked on the planet's image. "You know what needs to be done?" she said. Vance hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "A full planetary purge. No survivors?" Graves nodded. "This is the only way. If we leave even a fraction of them alive, they'll regroup. And in 100 years, we'll be fighting their descendants." Vance exhaled. This was how humanity had survived for so long, not through mercy, but through ruthless efficiency. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting to ensure they would never have to fight again. But still, something about this felt different. He had no sympathy for the Vrick. They had enslaved entire civilizations, committed atrocities across the stars. But the thought of billions of lives being wiped out in a single stroke? "Captain," Carter said, interrupting his thoughts. "Incoming transmission. It's from the Vrek High Chancellor." Vance exchanged a glance with Graves. "Put it through," the Admiral said. The holographic display flickered, and a Vrek figure appeared. A tall, regal-looking creature with pale golden scales and piercing black eyes. High Chancellor Vakrai, the ruler of the Dominion. His voice was steady, but there was fear behind it. "Humans," he said, his mandibles twitching. "You have proven your strength. You have destroyed our fleet. But I urge you to reconsider your next actions." Vance folded his arms. "Reconsider? After what your people have done?" Vakrai's eyes darkened. "We have ruled for millennia. We have conquered, yes, but so have you. This war does not need to end in genocide." Graves stepped forward. "Your people started this war. We're just finishing it." The Vrike Chancellor inhaled sharply. "There is no honor in extermination." Graves laughed coldly. "Honor? You enslaved entire species. You burned colonies that resisted, you gave no mercy, and now you beg for it?" Vakrai flinched but did not look away. "We are offering surrender." Vance and Graves exchanged glances. "Surrender?" Vance repeated. "Unconditional?" The Chancellor hesitated, just for a moment. Graves caught it immediately. "You think you still have options," she said, her voice turning to steel. "You don't." Vakrai exhaled. "We will give you our military. We will disband the Dominion, but spare our people." The bridge was silent. Vance felt something stir in his chest. A part of him wanted to take the deal, to be done with it, to end the war without extermination. But then Graves spoke. "No." The Chancellor's expression twisted. "You cannot mean to—" "This isn't about winning," Graves interrupted. "It's about making sure there's nothing left to fight back." Vakrai's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You would become what you claim to hate." Graves leaned in toward the display. We became what we needed to be. You thought we were weak. You thought you could break us. But you only forged something stronger." Vakrai's eyes flickered with realization. And fear. Graves turned to Vance. "End the transmission." Vance hesitated, then cut the feed. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Then Graves turned to the fleet's officers. "Proceed with the bombardment." And so humanity's final lesson to the galaxy began. The order was given. There was no turning back. Across the fleet, humanity's warships adjusted their positions, taking up precise firing solutions. The bombardment was not a reckless, chaotic rain of destruction. It was calculated. Cold. Every orbital cannon, every railgun, every energy lance was locked onto critical infrastructure. Military command centers, planetary defenses, industrial hubs, and spaceports. The Vrek had ruled for thousands of years. That reign was about to be reduced to hours. "Fire," Admiral Graves commanded. The first volley struck the planet's shield. The protective barrier shimmered against the onslaught, absorbing enough energy to vaporize moons. But it didn't hold. It couldn't. It cracked like glass. The second volley hit the surface. Massive explosions rippled across entire continents, turning cities into firestorms. Shockwaves leveled everything in their path. Towers that had stood for centuries crumbled like sandcastles in a hurricane. The screams of billions filled the emergency comm channels. Pleas for mercy, desperate transmissions. They had expected war. They had never expected this. Vance watched the destruction unfold from the bridge of the Titan. The planet was dying in real time, its once thriving cities reduced to molten craters. He had fought battles before, but nothing like this. This wasn't a fight. It was extermination. "Final phase of bombardment commencing," Lieutenant Carter reported. The fleet launched their planet breakers, massive payloads designed to trigger tectonic instability. They weren't just killing the Vrek. They were erasing Vreknar from existence. On the main view screen, the surface of the planet fractured. Entire land masses broke apart, magma spilling from the wounds. Tsunamis hundreds of meters high swallowed continents. The planet's atmosphere thickened with smoke and debris, suffocating whatever life remained. And then, the final blow. The Titan fired its main weapon, a supercharged kinetic rod, a projectile moving at relativistic speeds fired from orbit directly into the planet's core. The impact wasn't just devastating, it was absolute. The core destabilized. The planet trembled. The very foundation of Vreknar began to tear itself apart. Vance exhaled slowly. "It's done." Admiral Graves didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply nodded. "Mark it as confirmed. The Dominion is no more." Silence filled the bridge. The war was over. The enemy was gone. But as Vance looked at the burning wreckage of a civilization that had once dominated the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not in the Vrek, in them. Humanity had always fought for survival, for justice, for freedom. But today they had fought for something else, and the galaxy had witnessed it. For the first time, they weren't the ones being conquered. They were the ones who erased an enemy. And deep in the void, in the silence left behind by the destruction, one truth settled into the bones of every soldier, every officer, every survivor who had seen what humanity was truly capable of. There was no empire left to challenge them, no enemy strong enough to threaten them. The embers of Vreknar still glowed in the darkness of space, a burning graveyard where a civilization had once stood. Across the human fleet, silence reigned. There were no cheers, no celebrations, only the quiet hum of warships holding position over the shattered world. Captain Elias Vance sat in his chair aboard the Titan, staring at the destruction below. His hands were steady, his mind sharp, but something deep in his chest felt heavy. "This is the only way," Admiral Graves had said. And yet, as Vance watched the ruins of a world burn, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. A transmission request flashed on his console. Not from a Vrek survivor. There were none left. This came from one of their own. "Incoming message from the UHC Council," Lieutenant Carter reported. "They want to speak to you directly, sir." Vance exhaled, straightening his posture. "Patch them through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the image of Counselor Aria Voss, one of the most powerful figures in the United Human Coalition. Her face was unreadable, but there was something in her sharp blue eyes, curiosity, calculation, and perhaps the smallest hint of unease. "Captain Vance," she said smoothly, Admiral Graves? She nodded toward the older officer, who stood beside Vance with arms crossed. Counselor? Graves replied, her voice firm. You've done what was necessary, Voss said. The Dominion is no more. Humanity is now the unchallenged power in this sector. There was a pause, a tension lingering beneath her words. But? Vance prompted. Voss's expression remained neutral. But you understand what this means, don't you? We have just rewritten the rules of war. The galaxy has seen what we're capable of. You didn't just defeat an empire, you erased it. Graves didn't flinch. And now no one will dare challenge us. Isn't that what you wanted? Voss studied her carefully. Perhaps. But history is watching, Admiral, and so are our allies. Vance's brow furrowed. Allies? Carter hesitated before speaking up. Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from alien factions. Some are congratulating us. Others... She hesitated. Others are horrified. Vance exchanged a glance with Graves. They both knew what this meant. The galaxy had always feared the Vrek Dominion. They had been the tyrants, the unchallenged rulers of a 1,000-year empire. But now, they were gone. And something worse had taken their place. Not a conqueror, not a ruler, but a predator. A species that did not just defeat its enemies, it erased them. Humanity has secured its place, Graves said, her voice unwavering. That was the mission. That was the objective. Counselor Voss leaned forward slightly. And what happens when the next species decides we're the threat? Vance remained silent. He had no answer. The transmission ended a moment later, leaving only the quiet hum of the Titan's bridge. Carter shifted uncomfortably. Orders, sir? Vance inhaled slowly. Set course for Sol. The fleet turned, engines igniting as they left the ruins of Vreknar behind. But Vance knew, deep down, this wasn't over. Humanity had won the war. But the fear they had sown? That was only beginning. As the fleet drifted into the abyss of space, the weight of their victory hung over them like a silent storm. The once mighty Vrek Dominion was nothing but dust and echoes now, erased from the stars in a display of absolute power. But power had consequences. On the Titan's bridge, Captain Elias Vance sat in his chair, hands steepled beneath his chin, eyes fixed on the swirling expanse of hyperspace beyond the viewport. The journey back to Sol would take weeks, but he knew the real challenge lay ahead, not in space, but in the halls of power waiting for them back home. He wasn't the only one who felt it. Sir, Lieutenant Carter said hesitantly, breaking the silence. Morale reports are mixed. Vance arched an eyebrow. Mixed. Carter nodded. Some officers believe we did what had to be done, that we secured humanity's survival forever. But others... She hesitated. Others are questioning if we went too far. Vance exhaled. He wasn't surprised. Every soldier who had stared down at the burning wreckage of Vreknar had felt the weight of what they had done. There was no glory in planetary extinction. No songs would be sung about the heroes of this war. Only whispers of what humanity had become. Admiral Graves, standing beside him with arms crossed, scoffed. Questioning it now is foolish. If they had doubts, they should have spoken up before we shattered that planet. Carter shifted uncomfortably but held her ground. With all due respect, Admiral, people process things differently. It's one thing to follow orders in the moment. It's another to live with them afterward. Graves' jaw tightened. If they can't live with victory, they don't belong in this fleet. Vance watched the exchange silently before finally speaking. This isn't about victory anymore. Both Graves and Carter turned toward him. Vance leaned forward, voice quieter now. This is about what comes next. About what happens when the rest of the galaxy realizes what we're capable of. Graves's expression hardened. They won't dare oppose us. Maybe not openly, Vance admitted, but we just painted a target on humanity's back. The Vrek were feared because they ruled with an iron fist. But we didn't just defeat them. We wiped them from history. That kind of power doesn't make us kings. He met Graves' gaze. It makes us monsters. For the first time since the war began, Graves had no immediate response. A beeping alert on the console spared them from further debate. "Captain," Carter said, eyes wide, scanning the incoming data. "We're receiving a priority transmission, not from Sol, but from the Zender Accord." Vance frowned. The Zender Accord was a coalition of independent alien species, once considered a rival to the Vrek Dominion, though never strong enough to challenge them directly. Humanity had maintained a fragile alliance with them, based more on mutual convenience than trust. And now, with the Vrek gone... "Put it through," Vance ordered. The holoprojector flickered to life, revealing the form of Chancellor Marvek of the Zendar Accord. His species, tall, crystalline humanoids with shifting, iridescent exoskeletons, had always carried an air of wisdom and patience. But today, Marvek's expression was unreadable. "Captain Vance," Marvek said, his voice a low hum, as if resonating through stone. "Admiral Graves, I wish I were contacting you under different circumstances." "Chancellor," Vance said, straightening. "What can we do for the Accord?" Marvek's dark eyes flickered. "It is not what you can do for us. It is what you have already done to the galaxy." Vance said nothing, waiting. Marvek continued. "The extermination of the Vrek Dominion has shaken the foundations of every major power in the sector. Some see your actions as necessary. Others see them as an unforgivable atrocity." He tilted his head. "The Accord is divided." Vance's jaw clenched. This was worse than he'd feared. Graves, however, showed no concern. "Let them be divided. Their opinions change nothing." Marvek's gaze darkened. "On the contrary, Admiral, it changes everything." A silence stretched across the bridge. Marvek exhaled, his crystalline form pulsing dimly. "We have received intelligence that multiple civilizations, some who were once your allies, are gathering in secret. They are afraid of you, of humanity." He leaned forward. "And frightened creatures do not sit idle. They prepare." Vance felt a chill crawl up his spine. Carter's console beeped again, as if to punctuate Marvek's warning. She paled as she read the data. "Sir," she whispered, "long-range scans just picked up coordinated fleet movements from multiple factions. They're mobilizing." Vance turned back to Marvek. "Are you saying they're forming a coalition against us?" Marvek's gaze remained steady. "I am saying that the galaxy does not fear extinction. It fears being powerless against it." He leaned closer. "You have shown them what you can do. Now they will do whatever it takes to ensure you never do it again." Graves exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Let them come. We have the strongest fleet in the galaxy. They know they can't win a war against us." Marvek studied her, then Vance. "Perhaps. But ask yourself, Captain, how many alliances were forged in desperation? How many enemies did you just unite with a single act of destruction?" Vance felt the weight of those words settle over him. Marvek straightened. "I do not wish to see humanity destroyed, Captain. But know this, you may have ended one war." His voice was like a distant thunderclap. "But you have just started another." The transmission cut out. Silence fell over the Titan's bridge. Carter whispered what they were all thinking. "What have we done?" The return to Sol was not a triumphant one. There were no parades, no celebrations, only the silent, uneasy acknowledgement that something irreversible had taken place. Humanity had won the war, but in doing so, They had changed the course of galactic history forever. As the fleet docked at the massive orbital station above Earth, Captain Elias Vance stood before the high command of the Terran Dominion. The leaders of humanity, politicians, military strategists, and corporate heads, listened as he gave his full debrief. He told them of the Vrek's surrender, of Admiral Graves's decision, of the destruction that followed. He told them of Chancellor Marvek's warning. And then he told them the truth. "We have made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some faces were grim, others disturbingly satisfied. Fleet Admiral Graves stood beside him, arms crossed, defiant as ever. "We did what had to be done. Fear keeps us safe." Vance met her gaze. For now. A silence stretched between them. The council deliberated for hours, but in the end, the decision was already made, not by words, but by actions. The Terran Dominion would prepare for what was coming. More fleets would be built, defenses would be strengthened, espionage networks would be expanded to monitor every faction in the galaxy. Because the war had not ended, it had merely changed shape. Across the stars, the effects of Vreknar's destruction rippled outward like a supernova. The galaxy was no stranger to war, but never before had an empire been erased in a single act of calculated brutality. Species that had once bickered over borders now sat in secret meetings, forging alliances once thought impossible. The very civilizations that had feared the Vrek's rule now feared something far worse. A humanity unchained by morality, unburdened by restraint. They would not wait to see if Earth would strike again. They would not wait for their own worlds to burn. In the shadows of space, warships were being built, armies were being mobilized, plans were being set in motion, and at the heart of it all, a single, undeniable truth loomed over every council chamber and war room. Humanity was no longer just another power in the galaxy. They were the reckoning. Vance stood alone in his quarters aboard the Titan, staring out at the blue expanse of Earth below. His home, his people. He had fought for them, killed for them, secured their future with fire and blood. And yet, as he watched the stars beyond, he couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been lost. Not just the Vrek, not just the innocence of those who had carried out the purge, but the soul of humanity itself. A chime echoed through his quarters, a secure message. He opened it. One line of text appeared on the screen. "They are coming. No sender, no traceable origin, just a warning." Vance's fingers hovered over the console. He had no doubts about who was coming. The question was, when? He exhaled and straightened. The time for regret was over. Humanity had chosen its path, and now they would walk it, no matter where it led.